Other cities nationwide adopted the Philadelphia model, and thus a nation of rectangles was born. Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to shapes, that is, the geometry by which our respective nations are governed. You see, I hail from Britain, whose roads, for example, are long, winding, and ergonomically weird. Our flag is a mishmash of X's and triangles, our chocolate boxes are top-heavy, and our favourite side dish looks like this. But in America, there's one shape that rules supreme over all others, and I'm not talking about stars or triangles or Millard Fillmore's fine locks. I'm talking about rectangles. Rectangles are a surprisingly common feature of American life. So prevalent are they, in fact, that most Americans have actually become desensitized to the very notion. Just the other week, I explained the basic premise to a colleague from Portland who was puzzled. When I then told him what I'm about to tell you, his mind was completely and utterly a little bit blown. You see, I'm willing to wager that my observation, bolstered by the perspective of having grown up elsewhere, is not something that you as Americans have ever really had to consider. Until now. You see, there are two sides to every story, or in this case, four. Globally, few things symbolize the United States more than their national flag. Possibly conceived in its original layout by upholsterer Betsy Ross, Old Glory is absolutely striking for its 50 stars and 13 stripes, and so accustomed have we become to the word stripes that it's easy to forget that a stripe is itself a rectangle. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, oh, so what? You know, stripes are featured in countless flags around the world. What makes America so special? Well, I'm glad you never asked. The truth is, its flag bears more stripes than all but one nation on Earth. That's right, only Malaysia's flag has more. And even then, both flags are thought to share the same influence. And in total, the US flag is replete with 15 rectangles. That's the 13 stripes, the flag itself, and this blue box. In time, America would branch out from its 13 colonies, each represented on the flag by a single stripe, and become a nation of 50 stars. That's one for every state. And it is entirely fitting that I should mention the states, because even some of them get in on the act. Now, among the 50 states, there are precisely two of whose rectangularity I could, after several glasses of Merlot, be reasonably convinced, and those are Colorado and Wyoming. Now, the sober-minded among you, of course, will point out that neither state is a perfect rectangle, since, Congress drew them up against lines of latitude and longitude, meaning that their northern borders are a tad shorter than their southern borders. But, shut up. You sound like a bloody square when you talk like that, which is appropriate. The point is, no other major state, nation, or territory comes anywhere near close. All right? This is as quadrilaterally right-angled as it gets in the world of geographic boundaries. And while Colorado and Wyoming represent the cherry on top, some of its westward counterparts at least help to make up the cake. In fact, to extend the metaphor further, if this were an episode of the Great British Bake Off, then the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas would pass the technical challenge with flying colours. Even Rhode Island and Pennsylvania would do all right. As for my home state of Illinois, well, it tried, didn't it? It sort of looks like a half-eaten baked Alaska, which is more than I can say for Alaska. Anyway, the fact is, many American states at least gave it a go. Britain, by contrast, gave up. All across the land, you're as likely to find a straight line as you are an AC unit. We just don't do them. But wait, I hear you say, surely comparing US states with British counties makes no sense. They're not like for like. It's like comparing atoms and electrons, whole numbers and fractions, Millard Fillmore's hair with Millard Fillmore's presidency. Okay, fine, you want to play like that? Let's bring on the American counties. When I left Britain all those years ago, I began my new American life in the Hoosier state. Indiana, which would itself pass for a decent rectangle were it not for its soggy bottom, contained twice as many counties as the entirety of England. Furthermore, a quick glance at the map confirms something seemingly unusual. The whole state looked like a badly tiled wall. Its counties were mostly rectangles, or at least rectangles that had lost their way in life. And it didn't stop there, right? So amid the drama of presidential elections, it soon became clear to me that rectangular counties dominated the entire Midwest, not to mention the Great Plains. In other words, Middle America was one giant chessboard, a view also shared by campaign strategists. And it's all fun and games in the lower Great Plains, where the counties and bingo cards are one and the same. The Oklahoma Panhandle looking like a freight train, while Kansas is just a patchwork quilt made by your old Aunt Jane. Clearly, America has an obsession with rectangles. So we've looked at its flag, we've looked at the states, we've looked at the counties. Now, let's take a look at its cities. Given the swirling nature of Britain's streets, it's perhaps hardly surprising that the long and winding road came so naturally to Paul McCartney. Indeed, you'd be forgiven for thinking that his home city of Liverpool was based on the human circulatory system, something that McCartney fails to reference in the song, I'm Looking Through You. But McCartney, influenced as he was by American music, also counts the song Kansas City among his pretty decent repertoire. And Kansas City, Missouri, much like Kansas the state, is rectangled up in blue. Wait, no, that's Bob Dylan. And that's because it mostly employs what is known as a grid plan, that is, a city plan in which streets run at right angle to each other. And I only reference Kansas City because I needed a smooth segue from the Beatles. A better, more sprawling example of grid-like efficiency would be Manhattan, which is absolutely awash with block-like rectangles known as blocks. Indeed, located on one of these blocks is the very famous arena, Madison Square Garden. It's actually a circle. The point is, America is very fond of the grid system, and come to that, so am I. Navigation is more straightforward, it's probably easier to design, and you can tell somebody to meet you on the corner of 42nd Street and Park Avenue like they do in the movies. Oh, and speaking of parks, take a look at this. This is an aerial view of Central Park. You notice anything? That's right, it's where that one scene from Doctor Who was filmed, but it's also really rectangular. And in case you're thinking, that's just a Manhattan thing, it is not. This is the National Mall in Washington, D.C., rectangle. This is Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, rectangle, and these are just the ones I've personally seen myself. Those weren't my photos. Now, intriguingly, one of the first cities to implement America's grid system was Philadelphia in 1682. William Penn urged the city surveyor to design a system of wide right-angled streets from west to east that would include ample parkland. And this wasn't just because he was obsessed with Tetris, although he did have the theme tune stuck in his head like everybody else. It was to guard against overcrowding, fire and disease, all things that had beset London in 1666. And so as the nation expanded westward, other cities nationwide adopted the Philadelphia model, and thus a nation of rectangles was born. Now, before I finish, I don't want my British viewers to think that I've turned my back on the disorderly way of doing things. Far from it, in fact. I love nothing more than the quaintness of a winding British street, especially one whose curvature is perfectly summed up in a name like Backside Lane. Perfectly describes the shape, don't you think? It would be like America naming an entire village Oblong or something like that. We checked. There is an Oblong, Illinois, just 75 miles south of the unincorporated community of Block. Perhaps my home state has a few more surprises left in her yet. And speaking of surprises, nobody, least of all myself, could have predicted that we would be finishing out today's video with some kind words of encouragement from star of NBC's Will and Grace, Leslie Jordan.
Hey Lawrence and Terrence, Leslie Jordan. Congratulations on your YouTube channel, Lost in the Pond, hitting 50,000 subscribers. I know your next goal is 100,000 and you're going to get there. And this is from a patron of your channel that wants to congratulate you on this achievement. Congratulations on everything, guys.